Chief and Chief OPEC Correspondent for Energy Intelligence, and Richard Regolia, CEO of Matrix Global Holdings, and Awan Najia, Global Head of Derivatives for BB Energy. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this Monday. Amina, let me start with you, if I may. Let's cut to the chase of what's happening with Russian oil. By many forecasts and analyst comments, we've seen supposedly a drop of about 1 million barrels of Russian exports so far, despite the fact that we don't have an official embargo, but we have other sanctions, obviously, of all sorts impacting that. And how it might be feeling as an organization right now with the outlook for Russian production in medium term looking very bleak. Are they still really hoping to hold on to this relationship and relying on Russia as a partner?
That's a really good question, Diala. I think in terms of the losses that Russia is currently feeling, these numbers haven't translated yet into any of the OPEC reports that have been publicly made. There are a number of technical meetings that are supposed to happen ahead of the upcoming OPEC Plus meeting on the 2nd of June. And so far, at least to the public records, don't show any of this Russian loss in barrels. I'm sure that it's going to be discussed privately among delegations. There is an awareness that this is happening, but at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty about how these barrels are lost in the market. Is it a matter of just losses in Europe? Are they being rediverted into Asia? We've seen reports that India and China, for example, are importing more of these discounted Russian barrels. So is it just a matter of redirecting? And your second part of the question is, does OPEC want to keep that relationship with Russia? And absolutely, yes, without a doubt. OPEC Plus wants unity to continue. They want Russia to be part of the group. They don't see market management effective without Russia's presence. And therefore, that's why everybody's walking on eggshells when it comes to Russia and discussing Russia. So that's why, again, we're not seeing this sensitive topic of how much Russia is losing as a reaction to these sanctions being talked about.
Okay, well, I mean, but let's assume that we continue on the same trajectory of self-sanctioning, and we'll talk about the other things that are going to impact Russian production in terms of parts, etc. And there's no doubt that it's going to have an impact. Come September, OPEC need to agree on new quotas. There seems to be consensus that the group will continue as is, but again, are we going to see, do you think, Isha, what's the mood now of seeing Saudi and the UAE possibly really take up officially larger quotas to keep the market a bit calmer?
That's an excellent point where you say post-September. Nothing is going to happen before September. The deal is likely to run its course, meaning that these increments of 430, 400 continue during this period. Now, September is when the deal ends. And this is a time for all countries to really sit down and say, these baselines don't make sense. A lot of these countries can't even produce their baselines. So they could rearrange the deal in a way that makes more sense on paper. And again, depending on what the market condition is, but we all know that Saudi and the UAE are the only two players really with spare capacity that could increase production. We've been hearing, last week I spoke with the UAE energy minister, and he indicated that post-September, he hopes that the group will come to an agreement where production is not constrained from the market, meaning that, just reading between the lines here, I feel like the UAE hopes that they will be producing more, just given the situation of other members that they can't produce their baseline. But it all depends on the market situation at the time. And perhaps an idea, Russia will be treated like other members that are facing sanctions like Iran, Venezuela, Libya, which has special conditions, etc. And these countries are not really they're a member of the OPEC Plus group, but they don't have quotas. Perhaps this would be an idea for Russia to have no quota.
Okay, thanks, Amina. Awar, good morning. Just to get you on prices, we've seen them continue to remain supported and up a little bit. EU Commission is meeting, the ministerial meeting today, tomorrow, to try and reach an embargo. I think people are coming to the conclusion this is not going to happen anytime soon in terms of consensus on an oil embargo by the EU on Russia. But we do have this shipping insurance ban coming in August. So is that affecting the trading community's thinking in any way in terms of being able to move Russian oil?
I mean, they announced that a long time ago. So, and the only kind of new thing, I don't think the market is watching what the Europeans are saying, or what the Americans are saying, or sanctions, because basically they've done everything that they could, right? I mean, there's nothing else that they can sanction. Maybe they can sanction like the dolphins or the bears in Russia or something, but I mean, there's nothing that they can do. So the market knows that the West is all in, right? I mean, they even released SPR. They've said that, we won't stand for it, and we're gonna, we're gonna diversify from Russian fuel in the next 3 months, 2 months, 6 months, 5 years. So the market basically knows. The market is investing real money in this thing. So at the end of the day, it's not they don't believe that anything new is going to come out of either the EU or US or anything politically to bring down the price of oil. The question is, what's demand going to do? And I think unless you want to start talking about monkeypox, demand's going to continue higher. COVID, everybody's forgotten about. We're all going to die now, not so much. And supply basically. Geopolitically, this fight in Ukraine is basically a do or die for the West and for Russia. And basically, geopolitically, we're already seeing fallout in places like Libya. And at the end of the day, there's no, how can I put it? You haven't had investment in oil for such a long time. The green stuff is a damp squib, basically, and that's gone. So I think basically that the oil market is going to absolutely surge, and I think the reason is because it can. And I think that's my point of view. I think it's going to surge. I think it's going to do it in your face. I think since last week when we were talking about clouds and I don't know what, like weather conditions and something, the market's up $5 a barrel. And I think we're going to set new highs. And I think we're going to keep doing it. And I think inflation's going to rocket. And I think that when the Fed says, we're discussing half a point when inflation's at 12% and inflation for, factories is at 20 or 30%, it's a joke. So the market is absolutely set to, in my opinion, basically to literally rocket.
Okay, Omar, thanks. Richard, let's go to you then. Let's talk a bit about stateside, the Fed, look at a bit of the macro picture and demand, really, and what the feeling is in the US from a sort of demand destruction possibility, pending recession because of what the Fed's going to be doing over the next 12 months. What's your point of view now? Would you agree with Omar that we're going to see a positive trajectory on prices for all time to come?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's almost as if we're in an alternate reality. We're being told the market right now is, I think, prompt crude is $6 under its prior high. Crude out 2 and 3 years is making new highs. The market's seeing it. The market understands what's going on. OPEC, I'm looking at OPEC's data. They have demand in year 2023 at 101.6, 24, 102.7, and 25 at 103.6. They have US production at 14 million barrels out there. They have Russian production at 11.3. Well, what if US production is only 11.5 and Russian production is 8.5? There's not enough barrels there. So we are putting ourselves in a situation where our president says we're in an incredible energy transition, at which point he stops drilling in the Cook Inlet, he stops any ANWR production, he doubles the royalties on all new oil production. And so we're going to get what we deserve. We have decided that we're going to do this transition come hell or high water, and that's the path we're on. And the market is going to have to suffer for it. And we are going to pay the price. It's going to be the most regressive tax in history. And I don't really see any way out of it. I just saw the LNG, you know, it was in fact, your energy bulletin. It talked about if you had to convert the LNG, the natural gas pumped into Europe into LNG, it would equal half the supply of LNG in the world. In the US, the senators will not allow a pipeline built from the Marcellus, the most prolific field in the United States. They won't allow that pipeline built across the state of New York. So think about it. This is how they work. They have a vision. This is their vision. And they now are going to pay for it. And then they're going to tax and do this and do that and threaten to tax profits. But I think what you're saying and what the Fed is going to do, the Fed is stuck. Inflation is going to go up. It doesn't really matter. The energy GDP ratios of the world have gone from around 2.5% to about 0.5%. So the world has become more efficient. Now it's just going to consume oil and energy.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, the other side is that the economies that are really going to hurt are emerging markets, that the US and Europe, despite everything we're seeing today, are actually going to be relatively okay, and perhaps they can bear that pain for a bit longer. I mean, just back to you on production and supply, the current equation of what we're seeing in terms of Russian oil making more of its way to China, to India, because it's discounted, and India and China are certainly lapping it up as much as they can. What's the feeling within Gulf producers of them, even in the most immediate sense, sort of taking part of that market share in Asia? Does that come into their thinking at all?
Well, there were
market. I mean,
yeah, there was a little bit of concerns. I mean, initially, especially when there were reports that the Russians are discounting their crude about $30, there was concerns about that. These steep discounts do distort the market to some degree. But I haven't heard personally anything from the UAE, Saudi, or any of the other Gulf states about concern of this trend. It hasn't changed their strategy in any way or in terms of infrastructure. As you understand, Asian consumers rely a lot on Gulf producers because it's a way to get a sustainable supply line, and they have long-term contracts. So those haven't changed, and perhaps what we're seeing now is going to be a short-term phenomena. It's not something that they could rely on for an extended period of time. So there is no concern in that sense. And the discounts, as we understand now, I mean, initially they said $30. It's closer to $10, or even a little bit less than that. So in terms of concern, Diala, I would say no, there isn't much concern about that from Gulf producers.
But what about concern, Anwar? Let's talk about demand, flip back to demand a little bit. I mean, China, we've got the whole COVID equation that has taken over again to an extent, but a lot of talk in the last week or so about this pent-up demand just suddenly rocketing back any day now from China in a very tight market. Again, you know, how far can these prices be pushed if we see that scenario play out, in particular with the whole product situation?
$160 WTI. $160 WTI. You ask. Let me explain something to you. So when a trader sees a market on the ground, he doesn't do like the woke thing, go and extend the hand here, let me help you, and have a bit of water and say, no. You know what a trader does? He kicks the living crap out of it while it's on the floor, and then he'll keep kicking it, and then he'll do it more and more and more until it screams, and then he's going to do it more. So my opinion is that's what's going to happen, because it can. Everybody keeps saying that basically, you know, I think there's people are failing to understand the magnitude of all this. So just before this whole thing, we had the green idea, which was basically a way to tax everybody in the world except the Europeans and to a lesser extent the US, because basically everything that would be imported, we'd have to tax it because it uses dirty energy and all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, in less than a couple of months, Europe is going back to coal. They're bringing back. So forget all this stuff that they talk about. We, hug a tree and whatever it is. No, hug a tree if basically it makes money. It doesn't make money. So they're going to basically burn coal. They're going to burn wood. They're going to burn each other. Europe is going into a deficit for heating. They have a problem in Germany with glass bottles of beer because they can't make the glass to fill them up with beer, right? As I was trying to explain, the consumer in the West, it's not about that, the economies of the West are stuffed because of the way inflation is and the way debt is and their energy dependencies. But the consumer is also a voter. So he's going to see standard of living going down, costs skyrocketing, no beer, right? A president in the US, excuse me, but who's shaking hand with ghosts, right? We obviously have a big problem. In the UK, we've got a guy, Bojo, who's been accused on multiple occasions of lying, breaking the law, all this kind of stuff. In France, it's basically Macron. In Germany, it's that clueless guy, Olaf Scholz. It's a complete disaster. It's a complete disaster.
Yeah, okay, it's a disaster. We're going to get very worried now. We also saw, as you said, they're going to burn coal, and we saw India. We have one of our bulletin news headlines showing that India has started to import coal for the first time since 2015, I believe. So again, anything to keep its economy going, and it is going very strongly. Richard, back to you and the U.S. economy. We've seen Biden obviously try and reach out again and again to OPEC. That's not going to lead anywhere in the immediate sense. Politically speaking, he's probably trying to show he's doing what he can. You've talked about the energy transition. Let's just touch base on the Iran deal. I know that there's been a lot of talk about it being, again, muffled for the next few months till the midterms. But what's your point of view? Given that the US is very keen to get this deal done, could we see something done before then?
I think Amina would probably know better than I on that, just from from where she sits. But I would think what we're hearing here is nothing's going to happen. There's nothing that Biden can do that he can upset the apple cart. People would look at any kind of Iran deal as weakening him, and the last thing he can afford is that. He is doing everything he can to keep his head above water. The Democrats probably will get wiped out here going forward. And that's really going to be the problem. The U.S. is really starting to reel now with high prices, with inflation. It's in the news every moment of every day. And I think what both people have just said, and where I think we're at is we're stuck. There's nowhere to go. Our politicians have really sold us down the river. Angela Merkel was the darling of everybody. What did Angela Merkel do? Angela Merkel stopped all nuclear plants. Here in California, they're going to close nuclear plants. They're closing one in Michigan this week. That produces 6.5% of all the power in the state of Michigan and 15% of all the clean power. And I think one of the things that's going to come into this is as we go towards this transition, we're going to start to see fuel use in power. We've been moving away from fuel oil as a power source for a long time. What is that demand number going to be? Is it going to be 200,000 barrels a day, 500,000 a day, 700,000? It was about 500 this last winter. That is another demand part of this equation, that you have to heat your home. And people are going to burn coal. They're going to burn fuel oil. That means it's going to take barrels. It's going to come. Oil demand is going to go up. And so I think we're effectively stuck. And as I said to you earlier before we got on, I've watched this market for decades. We have never been in this situation. It is always self-corrected. We've always been in a situation when prices are high. There is money going into exploration and production. It causes that. It has an effect on it. This time, we're not going to be able to do it.
Okay, Amina. We'll get to Iran, and just if you can give us an update on where you're at with that in terms of what OPEC's thinking on that front as well. Sorry, we've just got the survey question up now. Will the EU's failure to agree a Russian oil embargo be bullish or bearish for prices? So there are your choices: bullish, bearish, makes no difference. Let's talk about that actually, Amina. Will and a failure to agree. It looks like that's not going to happen. We're going to have Russian oil embargoed in other ways and restricted, as we're already seeing. There's no way the EU can agree, can they? And how is OPEC looking at that? What's their thinking, do you think, in terms of an official sanctions of Russian oil happening?
Well, it won't be the first time, Diala, that an OPEC Plus member gets sanctioned. That's something a lot of people forget, that a lot of members in the group, including Iran, Venezuela, etc., I mean, they face sanctions, and they're somehow still part of OPEC Plus. They're still part of this alliance. And that's why I brought up the idea, perhaps one way to deal with it is to just treat Russia like the others, for Russia not to have an official quota, but to be part of the group. That idea hasn't been discussed yet, but I mean, just looking at how the organization dealt with these situations in the past. Coming back to the Iran question, I agree with Richard. Nothing seems to be happening on that front. We don't see an imminent agreement. And in terms of oil policy, all roads for the US, I mean, in terms of getting more production, all roads lead to Riyadh, and it's back to Riyadh again. Biden is asking Saudi Arabia to increase its production. We saw reports of possibly a Biden visit to Saudi Arabia, which officials have been, US officials have been sent to Riyadh to prepare for that. And we've seen reports that the US could even intervene in the island negotiations between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, for Egypt to hand over some of the Red Sea islands. And perhaps that exchange or that diplomatic token would be appreciated by Riyadh enough to consider an increase in production. But for the time being, I can tell you that it's not an issue that's going to be discussed at this upcoming meeting. I suspect that they're just going to keep policy unchanged until September, and this is the time where everything could be renegotiating depending on the market condition.
Okay, Omar, what's the outlook for product? Obviously that's been pulling the market up all the time. There's a shortage everywhere, as we know. Jet fuel, where are we at with that, given that we're seeing crazy banana bookings happening all over the world? Travel, obviously going to boom this summer. Again, pent-up demand, still no recession, and COVID's almost gone away. Where are we with products? And could we see any relief? Could we see China taking advantage and trying to kind of ramp up its exports of that?
No. China's basically buying for Russian oil for the SPR, right? The US also is doing this NOPEC deal, this NOPEC bill to sanction whatever OPEC and all the rest of it, right? So you can't be giving, I mean, I'm sorry, but you have to have a little bit more kind of respect for people. You can't go to OPEC and tell them, look, we want more oil, and then have a NOPEC bill because we're going to screw you if you don't give us oil. And here's a couple of islands, but give us more oil. I mean, at the end of the day, the US, I mean, what Saudi Arabia has, it has all its assets in the US, right? All its money. And Russia had like $300 billion there, and they were taken away in a day. So either the Saudis are that stupid, or the Saudis, the UAE, all the rest of it are not. I believe that they're not. I believe that if you tell OPEC, look, like you did 3 months ago, you are totally surplus to requirements, because now we're going to make, the sun and the wind and all the rest of it is going to be great. So go and die quietly. If you tell them that, and then 3 months later you tell them, we need more oil. You got to give us more oil. What do you think they're going to do? You can't treat people like that. People have, I believe, memories, and they're smart. OPEC is not going to give them.
It's about, well, these people, the Gulf producers, want to make money. So, if they can, they'll make a buck, regardless of who's asking them and why.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you call somebody a pariah, and if basically you say that, you chop whatever, you can't go then and meet them. And how can Biden meet anybody? Seriously, how can Biden meet anybody at all? So I'm sorry, it's basically the real problem, like Richard was saying, is that the political class has almost collapsed. It's now a joke. There is no savior. It's not going to happen. OPEC isn't going to save us, neither is the US. the save is going to be prices that go so high that people will curse the day that people start talking about green energy.
Yeah.
So let's wait and see.
Thanks, Omar. Richard, let's talk about other commodity prices. We can. Obviously, we've seen oil and products rocketing and remaining supported. Clearly, the whole commodity complex is up because of the war in Ukraine, food prices in particular, grains, etc. We haven't even seen anything of that yet, that impact. The US perhaps has less to worry about. But the outlook from the US on the whole commodity complex, whether it's metals, microchips, etc., where's that thinking, and what can it do, if anything, in terms of securing supply?
They can't. They wish to have electric cars. Gavin Newsom, and you took my pariah line there, Omar. I've used that multiple times. You don't call someone a pariah and then want to go shake his hand. So Gavin Newsom wants to do two things. He wants to stop all oil production in California by 2045. But he also wants to have all cars, and Biden, they want to have half of all cars be electric. At the exact same time, the two biggest mines in the United States they've just basically said, you're not going to get built. So exactly how the US will deal with the new commodity problem, right? So you're trading the oil security for mineral security. They can't get their story straight, right? If I can't build a mine to mine nickel or lithium, how do I create 50,000 new cars a day? You can't. And so I don't know how we're going to get out of it. I think it's inflation will run rampant. Oil prices will go up until people scream. They will throw out the current politicians. The next politicians will come in. I'm not sure they'll be able to do anything, but I think we've baked the cake, and now we're going to have to eat it. That's just the way it is. This has been happening since 2019. This is not new. We've been on this trajectory since basically 2020. If you look at prices were very high in 2020. In fact, I went back and looked at prices. So when you look at prices forward, that's what the market thinks. So the price forward for natural gas is $4.20, 20 months forward. You know what the price of natural gas was back in 2008 when the market 20 forward? It was $10. Natural gas prices 2 years forward, 14 years ago, were $10. This market can go a lot higher. And so it's going to feed into everything. It's going to feed into transportation and food and going to a restaurant. We're stuck. We did it to ourselves, and now we're stuck.
I mean,
no way out.
I mean, I will let you have the last word. Just okay. Let's look at the poll there. So, would a failure to reach an embargo be bullish? 22% only saying bullish, which is kind of interesting. More people saying it'll be bearish. Make no difference. The majority, 52%. Amina, would you agree with that? And just again, from a Gulf economy point of view, obviously doing very well here with oil prices and budgets back in balance, etc. Are you hearing through the grapevine any concerns about food prices and inflation here, and that coming across obviously from the rest of the world, hitting us here? It already is. How much concern is that, do you think? And would oil producers, as a result, do more about it if they can to bring that down?
No, Diala, we live in a region. I mean, the GCC is a region where we import everything. Almost all food products are imported. So we really feel the impact of inflation. But at the same time, it's shielded by the fact, I mean, the government to some extent could shield at least the nationals here from this type of inflation, and because oil prices are so high, you're getting all this extra cash pouring into the budget and reserves, etc. So that adds a little bit of a cushion. And as we've been discussing before the call, I mean, we're not seeing any kind of demand destruction on any level. The streets here in Dubai, as we said, like they're super busy. You're not seeing people not going out or spending money. The malls are filled up. So we're not feeling the impact yet, I would say.
Richard, just sorry, last word to you then. Tell us about the mood for recession expectation in the US. Now people are saying, not if anything, it might not hit till 2024 if we continue on this trajectory. You know, so given that we've got this inflation that can't be put under control.
Yeah, they're going to try to keep it controlled. There'll be another rate cut, and at some point we'll start the money printing again. So the Fed knows it's stuck, so it has really nowhere to go. I think we will see a point where the recession will come, but I don't know when that would be. I do think that they will, any kind of correction in the stock market, if we make another move down, they will step in or not step in, and they will make sure there is no recession at this moment in time. It would be more like 2023, and it'll probably be ugly. But the problem is going to be a recession is going to come when interest rates go up, and they're not going to raise these interest rates much longer.
Okay, so we'll just see money printing again and see the same story repeated all over again, fortunately or unfortunately. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you to Richard, Amina, and Amar.
Thank you
For joining us this Monday morning, and have a good week. All the best.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.